And hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, we're gearing up for Thanksgiving on Chef AJ Live, which is why we're doing so many cooking demos. But today, the demo is being done by a plant-based medical doctor who's been on the show before, Dr. Niki Davis. She's going to show you what she makes for her family's Thanksgiving. All the recipes are right below in the show notes. Show notes are what appears underneath the video on YouTube. And she's going to show us her little twist that she has made to recipes of Dr. McDougall. Please welcome Dr. Davis to the show. Thanks for doing this. I love cooking demos, especially by doctors, because it shows that anybody can do them.
Yes, it's so good to see you. And, I don't make super complicated recipes, but, I find the ones that work for me that are simple and make Thanksgiving not a huge chore, which is a big deal. Something that's simple to put together and not stressful. And that's, and they taste good too. And nice and starchy. So, yeah.
Didn't you do a rotation with Dr. McDougall?
Yeah, when I was in medical school, in my third year of medical school, I had a chance to go work with him in Santa Rosa during one of his 10-day live-in programs. So it was pretty amazing to get to see the man actually working, helping patients get well. It was pretty fantastic to see, and it was just very confirming that I am on the right path, being able to be a plant-based medical doctor.
Right, and not afraid to eat potatoes.
No, love potatoes.
My favorite. And I assume they're going to appear in today's presentation.
Well, we're going to make, so I'm going to make 4 recipes. Now, as you mentioned in the show notes, I put basically everything that, for the most part, I make on Thanksgiving. We only have an hour show, so I can't make every single thing, but I'm going to make 4 of the recipes. And you'll see that they are really simple. One of them I did prepare last night because it's one of the tweaks that you mentioned, one of the McDougall recipes that I do a little bit differently, and I think it makes it really extra good. But yeah, we'll do 4 recipes that'll include a tofu loaf, gravy, sesame greens, so a nice green dish with kale, and then the dessert, which is apple crisp. Now, I always also make mashed potatoes, and I'll let you know how I make those. I make it really simple. I use the Instant Pot and my blender, and they're really, really super easy to make. So I won't be doing that today, but I'll probably be making those later, actually, because I'll have some gravy that I'll need to use up.
Good. I can't wait. Tofu loaf.
Yeah, so in fact, that's what I'm going to start with, is the tofu loaf. I really, maybe if somebody today has a good idea on what we can call it, I don't want it to be a name of a bird, because a lot of people will say, oh, my vegan bird or my vegan goose, but maybe a good name for this that doesn't sound so unappealing, because to me, tofu loaf just doesn't sound very appealing. So maybe we can come up with a different name for it. But you should have the recipe in the notes there. So it is the Dr. McDougall tofu loaf. It is available online, free to find this recipe. I purchased his app that's $5. It's totally worth it to me because I can favorite kind of some of the things that I make a lot. But this one I have in the app, and really all you do is you take everything and you put it in a bowl, you mash it up. So it's really quite simple. So first thing that we do is we're going to add tofu. And I know, AJ, I always feel guilty using soy or tofu because I know you can't have it.
Yeah, that's okay. I wonder if there's like a substitute for it, though.
I wonder.
Hey, wait, there is pump fu and hemp fu, actually. And now that I think of it, they make a tofu-like substance at some of the natural grocers in the refrigerator section called hemp fu and pump fu, which is made out of pumpkin seeds or hemp seeds. Interesting.
I mean, it seems simple. Tofu is really, it's just the soybean that's been pressed and made into this, square. It seems like you should be able to use some other beans to make a tofu-like substance. But so it calls for 30 ounces of water-packed firm tofu. And each of these squares is 14 ounces. So it's about that amount. Now in the recipe, this is a Mary McDougall recipe. She says to drain the tofu well, which I drained it pretty well. I didn't press the tofu or anything like that. So it's going to have a little bit of moisture in it still, which is fine. So then the first thing you'll do is take those 2 blocks of tofu and you're just gonna use a potato masher, mash it up, really simple.
I use my potato masher for so many things, even to mash bananas for a recipe.
Yes, yeah. I know it's funny, I don't really use it to mash potatoes, but I use it to mash a lot of other things. Okay. And you do want to mash it pretty fine. If you don't want big chunks of tofu, you know, you just want to just mash it pretty well. But if you like big chunks of tofu, you could leave it a little bit more chunky. Okay, so it turns out kind of like that, where you got your mashed up tofu at the bottom. And then we are going to add oats. So this is, let's see here, 1 2/3 cup quick oats. So basically quick oats, it just means that it's been cut up. You know, you could use steel cut oats, but you can also buy the quick cooking oats. These are just regular, I think they're steel cut oats. Yeah, so you're just gonna pour that in. And then it also calls for breadcrumbs. So her recipe says whole wheat breadcrumbs. I couldn't find any yet. I might be able to find some before Thanksgiving, but these are just panko breadcrumbs. So it's more of a white bread, but it doesn't have any oil in it. So if you can find whole wheat, that's better. But that is 3/4 cup of the breadcrumbs. And then we are going to add, so it says 1/2 cup of ketchup or barbecue sauce. And I actually like the flavor of the barbecue sauce better. So I found, yeah.
Ketchup's
so I found
sweet, you know?
You know, I'm not a fan of, so I love fresh tomatoes and I love fresh tomato salsa, but I don't really like tomato sauce type stuff. So I don't really like ketchup. I don't really like, you know, anything that's like really tomatoes that have been broken down. I don't know why. I've just always been that way. But I do love fresh tomatoes, especially from the garden. So this barbecue sauce, this is 1/2 cup of barbecue sauce. And you do have to watch. No, this one is a 365 brand. That's a vegan one. And I want to say it does have sweetener in it. Yeah, so it does have, so if you're trying to stay away from sugar, this one does have some sugar in it. But it's a really tasty one. And I will say that some of the recipes that I'm making today do have some things in it that I don't use on a daily basis. So for instance, tahini, I try to stay away from the really higher fat, calorie dense things on a daily basis, but on a special occasion like Thanksgiving, I will sometimes use some of those things. For instance, Dr. McDougall has a fat-free golden gravy that is really delicious. And I use that for the most part when I'm making mashed potatoes and gravy for my family for a meal. But on Thanksgiving, I do the creamy golden gravy, which I'll make today. And that one does have a little bit of tahini in it. Just gives it a little bit more creaminess, kind of fun for a special occasion. Okay, so we've got the barbecue sauce. And then this is listed as optional. But I am going to use it. It's just a tablespoon of soy sauce, and I use the low sodium for that. Okay, and then you're going to add some vegetable broth. And I have a few that I really like. So the Better Than Bouillon is a really delicious one that I'll use a lot. This one happens to be the seasoned vegetable base that's reduced sodium. This one I'm using today, this is just a Pacific brand organic veggie broth that's low sodium as well. And sometimes I do that just because it's a little bit easier.
Hey, Dr. Davis, Sherry's saying, I forgot, where does Dr. Davis live and where does she practice?
Yeah, so I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, born and raised here. I love it here. Lots of outdoor stuff to do. And I am a telehealth doctor. So I am actually licensed in, I think, 13 different states now. So I practice technically all over the country, even though I am out of Utah. But I work for a company called Plant-Based Telehealth, where we do lifestyle medicine around the country. And I think we have almost all 50 states covered.
That's,
All right, so that veggie broth was 1/3 cup.
I'm just curious, are there certain states more than others that seem to request telehealth?
So as far as plant-based telehealth or lifestyle medicine, yes, very popular in California, Florida, Texas, some of the bigger states, Colorado. I actually got a lot of people from Utah, plenty of people that would love to see me in person, but I just see them over Zoom. Okay, so 1/3 cup of veggie broth, and then what I have in here is 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. So I've got, and this one I think is a Trader Joe's brand. I know you like Trader Joe's, AJ, but this is just a Dijon mustard from there. And then, okay, now you can help me. So how do you say that? Worcester?
Worcestershire. That is a hard word to say.
Worcestershire. Oh, it's so fun to say though. Worcestershire. Okay.
Kind of like saying, what's this here sauce? What's this here sauce? That's how I remember. I think of what's this here sauce? What's this here sauce? Worcestershire sauce. It is.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Okay. So we've got 2 tablespoons of each. So 2 tablespoons of the Dijon mustard and then 2 tablespoons of the Worcestershire sauce.
It is a hard word to say.
All right. And you have to find a vegan one because I guess there are non-vegan
Because I think sometimes they
sauces.
have anchovy. Anchovy, I think, is used in some of them.
Yeah. So the one that I found is Annie's. It's a vegan one. I think I found it at Whole Foods or something.
One of the live viewers named Catherine is saying you could toast any type of bread and pulse in the food processor to make breadcrumbs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great idea. I'm a little bit too lazy to go that far, but okay. So now the last thing we're going to add is just 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. That's what I really like about this one. So this is the one recipe that I will make the night before Thanksgiving. So, and I'll tell you why as we get a little bit farther along. But basically, you're just going to mash this up. And man, that's basically all you have to do besides cook it. So once you get it all nice and mashed up and mixed, then you're going to take like a loaf pan. So something like this. And I'm actually going to put a little parchment paper in this one. So I made one last night that I'll show you how it'll turn out today. But I put it in a nonstick. This one, I'm going to put some parchment in there just so it doesn't stick to the bottom of it.
Do you ever think of using like a silicone loaf pan?
Yeah, that's actually what I used for the one that I made last night. I only have one of them. So that is normally what I use, but just to show you guys kind of how this looks, I'm going to put this into here so you can see what it ends up looking like. But yeah, those silicone pans are really, really nice, especially the ones that have the hard side on it so that you can carry it around easily. It's not too floppy. So then you're just going to take your whole mixture and just press it in. And I'll let you see what this looks like once it's in there.
So Dr. Davis, Linda says, I missed it. When and why did she become vegan? You actually didn't tell your story this time, but if you want to do a little version of it.
Yeah, so I mean, my story, it's been a lifelong story. It wasn't just that one day I watched Forks Over Knives and decided to go vegan. I just, as a teenager, decided that I didn't think that eating meat was healthy. And I've always been an animal lover. And so when I was about 13, I decided to stop eating, red meat, and noticed that I felt better and just, I just really enjoyed not eating meat. I never really liked it to begin with when I was a kid. And so when my parents would make it, I was not very excited to have it. So over the years, I started removing more and more animal foods out of my diet just because I think as you start removing one animal food, it's over time, you don't like it as much anymore. It just wasn't as appealing to me. And then I started learning about, how animals are treated and the damage it's doing to our environment. And eventually in my 20s became completely vegan. And then also about that time was when I started learning about the health aspects of eating vegan and plant-based. So it took about, a 30-year process of going from basically vegetarian to vegan, kind of like junk food type vegan, not very healthy vegan, to whole food plant-based. So it really started out as a health thing, transitioned to, being worried about the animals, the planet. And then ultimately I decided that I wanted my job to be helping people get well on a whole food plant-based diet. And so here I am today. But it's been quite the ride. It's been an interesting journey to have it be that long of a transition. Okay, so this is what the tofu loaf looks like before you cook it. All right, so now what the recipe says is to just go ahead and cook it now. And so normally what I would do is then stick this in the oven at 350 for 60 minutes. And then once that's done, then that's basically the recipe. It says, then you'll just slice it up and serve it. So what I do differently is I will throw this in the oven for 60 minutes. It'll get nice and brown on top, and I will actually show you that. Get it out of my fridge.
You think you'll ever
What's that?
Oh, I was going to say, do you think you'll ever write either a book or a cookbook, or maybe a combo?
I don't know. My mom and I have talked about that because she's got some good recipes. So we've talked about the possibility of doing maybe a cookbook or something together. So we'll see. So I would cook it for 60 minutes. And then the thing that I do differently is I then put it in the fridge overnight. Okay, so this is the loaf that I made yesterday. And there's my nice silicone. So this has been cooked for 60 minutes and then stored in the fridge over the night. So the reason that I do that, so what I found when I was first making this recipe is that when you cut it, it kind of falls apart a little bit. It's a little bit crumbly. And not only that, the top is the best part because it's nice and crispy. So what I've done is I will take it out of there. And so now that it's been chilling overnight, it's a little bit more firm, so it's easier to cut. And let's see. So what I'll do is I will cut it into slices. And it's much, much easier to slice when it's cold like this. So I'll cut it into a bunch of slices. And then I will take those and put those back in my toaster oven, which AJ, you have one of these, the Breville air fryer toaster ovens, don't you?
Yeah, I don't know how people live without one.
I use it for everything. And in fact, I don't know if you noticed, but in my kitchen, I do not have an oven. So a little bit of a story, we had an oven kind of explode on us. And so we do now finally have a stove, but everything that I cook in an oven, I use my Breville. And I've been doing that for about the last 2 years now. So at some point I will get an oven, but for now it actually works pretty well. All right. So what I will do then is I just have this tray that I've put some parchment paper in. And then I just basically line these up flat and cook them at about 400. And what happens is then you get that nice crispy texture on the top of it. And then every single piece has that nice crisp texture.
And everybody gets that piece.
Yes, exactly. But the other thing that's really nice about doing it this way is you can prepare it overnight. And then this is literally all you have to do to get it ready for Thanksgiving. So it's a lot less work and you're not having to make this whole loaf the day of. You just put it in and heat it up on the day.
Diana's saying you should call it Toasty Thankful Loaf.
Oh, I like that. Toasty Thankful Loaf.
Yeah. Christian, the recipe's in the show notes. It's right below the video. Susanna says, did you always want to be a doctor? That's an interesting question. No, I did not always want to be a doctor.
So early in my life, and another life from now, I was a mechanical engineer. So I was basically a rocket scientist. I worked as a contractor with NASA on the space shuttle program. And I always really liked math and science. I really liked inventing and, I liked challenging things. I liked solving problems. But when I got to the actual work of being an engineer, it just was not something I was super passionate about. And at that time was also when I started learning about how a plant-based diet can help improve your health. So left my career and went back to school. Now, I actually ended up doing both a bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering. So the thought of going back to school again, it took me a while to get there. But once I realized what it was that I was passionate about and what I wanted to do, I've never looked back. Don't regret it at all. Even those long, long nights of working in the hospital, I have to pinch myself now because what I get to do every day, I get to see people get well and just be on that journey of people improving their health, getting off medications, getting off insulin, reversing disease. It's just fantastic. And I wouldn't want it any other way. All right, so the tofu loaf is now in the oven. So we will let that go for a little bit. And then I'm gonna do gravy next. So this is the creamy golden gravy by Dr. McDougall. And this one I make really, really simple, okay? So this is, I think, another Mary McDougall. Yep, Mary McDougall recipe. And she has you kind of combine stuff in the pan and then slowly add, and this is kind of the way that you normally would make gravy, is you slowly add the flour in to kind of thicken it over time. Well, I figured I'd try something really simple one day and it worked. So this is how we do it now. So what I do is I throw all of the ingredients in my blender, including the flour. Okay, and I'm actually making a double recipe because why not? Gravy is delicious. So the creamy golden gravy calls for 2 cups of vegetable broth. So I'm going to do 4 cups, and I'm going to do it over the sink so I don't spill here. Okay, and then it calls for 3 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce. So I've got, this is 6 tablespoons because I said I'm doubling it. And then it calls for, like I said, this is the creamy version of the fat-free golden gravy. So if you don't want to do the extra fat, I would recommend the fat-free golden gravy. It's delicious as well. This one just has a little bit of tahini in it if you want it to be a little bit creamier. So this is going to be, so the 2 tablespoons of tahini. So this is 4 tablespoons.
That's a blend tech, right?
It is, yes. We love the blend tech.
Same here.
Is that what you have too?
Yeah, I mean, I have the Vitamix too, but I always seem to go to the blend tech.
Oh, you do? You have both?
I have both. I like the blend tech. I think it's prettier.
The only reason I went with the blend tech, to be honest, is it's a local company in Utah. So I thought, well, they make them in Utah. I might as well support local. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to add is, instead of 1/4 cup of brown rice flour, I'm going to do 1/2 cup because we're doubling it.
Oh, Susanna says, did you get the hearing protection thing over it to soundproof it?
Oh, yeah, yes. My husband did not like our old one, which was very, very loud. And so he said, if we're getting a new one, we have to get one that is quiet. So that's what we did. And it is actually really nice.
So
And
here's
the brown rice flour is just the Arrowhead mills that I use.
So here's
And that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, it's just, this will be funny if you do know. Do you know Cyril Bruno? He worked for NASA. Wouldn't that be funny if you did?
No, I don't know. That would be funny though. Okay, so that's it. Now it does say that you can put some freshly ground black pepper on there. I would say you could do that later, but I'm just putting that whole thing in the blender. We're gonna let it go for just a second here. Let's see. You don't even have to let it go all that long. As long as it just gets nice and mixed. That's it. And this saves me a ton of time because I just literally just pour this over the stove, let it heat up, and it thickens up just the way it normally does. I use scan pans. Honestly, I just ran out of these, I think, through the McDougall's as well. This one's a nice deep one, so it's really good for making gravy, especially if you're going to do a couple of batches of it. So I just pour that whole thing in there. And then I'm going to put that on medium heat. This is actually a new stove for us, so hopefully I'm using it right. Okay, easy gravy.
It's funny that all the appliances, I think, are becoming more complicated.
Yes.
You know, I mean, dishwashers, and it's like everything is so electronic now that if something breaks, it's like you need an electrician. You know, it's just too high tech world for me. I know.
You know what's funny about it is all of them now have where you can set it up to where you can use it based on your phone, like on an app. So our new stove has the ability where you can turn it on or turn it off with your phone. I get it if you accidentally leave it on. Turning it off is nice if you're away and you want to double check, is it off? But it is kind of silly. You could be sitting on the couch. I'm going to heat up the stove right now. Okay, so we're going to let that gravy start going. And then the next thing I'm going to make is the sesame greens. So another McDougall recipe. This one I've made a ton. In fact, it's so easy and we like it so much that my husband and son and I will use it. We'll take it with us and use it when we're camping. So we can even make it camping. It's pretty simple. So first, what you do is you just get a bunch of kale. So it actually calls for one large bunch. I think this is about 3 because we like to make lots. But all you're going to do is, this is a wilted salad. So I'm just adding this into my pan here, and I'm going to add some water to it to help it kind of steam. And AJ, I think about you when I make this because at the end of it, you get this nice green juice at the end after you're done steaming it. I'm trying to remember what you call that.
Oh, pot liquor. That's what I'm drinking now. I love it. It's so good.
Are you serious? Oh, that's great.
Really? Well, because I live in Northern California now and it's freezing. It was 35 degrees. So I drink a lot of broth. It's basically broth.
It is, yeah. Broth that you've made yourself. Okay, so what I will add to that, it says to add 1/4 cup of water, but because I put so much in there, I'm going to do 3/4 cup water just to make sure it steams up nicely. Okay.
So is this your test run for Thanksgiving?
I suppose it is. Yeah, we're going to have Thanksgiving early at our house this year. So my son comes home from school today. He's going to have Thanksgiving dinner ready.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do medium on this one as well.
Hey, what did you do for Halloween with your son? How old is he now?
He's 9. So we go trick-or-treating. So he went trick-or-treating. You know, it's kind of that one time a year that he'll get a little bit of candy where we always separate out the non-vegan candy and the vegan candy, and then we just give away the candy that isn't vegan. And then I have to say, because he's not a kid that eats candy, he really gets sick of it really quickly, luckily, and we can get rid of it after a few days. But we had a lot of fun. My son was a pickle this year. So running around in a pickle costume, and he had ketchup and mustard. I don't know if you've seen those trick ketchup and mustard that you can squeeze and a string comes out. So he had a lot of fun with that.
He was a pickle. That's cute.
I know, isn't that great? It's like, of course, plant-based, of course. Got to be a pickle. Okay. So now with the sesame greens, so while those are kind of steaming up, we're going to see, this is the fun part of Thanksgiving, right? You've got to like keep on track of everything that you're doing here. So you got to make sure that you keep mixing up the gravy because it's going to start to thicken up. We're going to keep an eye on our loaf, which is starting to brown up really nicely, actually. So I don't think it's going to take too much more time. It's really just you're heating it up, getting it crispy. So with the sesame greens, you're basically just making a dressing. So the dressing is water, tahini, lemon, soy sauce, and then crushed garlic. Now this would taste just fine without the tahini as well. So if you want to do it without the tahini, you could, and I think it would taste just fine. So we're going to start with doing, I think I'm actually going to do a double batch of the sesame greens dressing. So instead of 2 tablespoons of water, 2 tablespoons of tahini, I'll do 4 and 4. So I'm going to grab some water here. So how are you liking being in Northern California, besides it being a little bit cold there?
Other than the weather, it's beautiful. There's no scorpions, or at least I haven't seen any scorpions, and there's lots of vegans.
Oh, really? Good.
Yeah, there's the Sacramento Vegan Society has over 6,000 members. I have over 600 in my little local one. And
wow,
it's very beautiful up here. There's so many trees, different kinds of trees. It's not just one kind of tree. In the desert, there was one tree. It's called a palm tree.
Really?
That was it. Mild and mild, but it is cold for me because I do prefer warmer weather if given a choice.
I'm the same. Summer's my favorite, but I do enjoy when it starts to get cold. And we've got snow on the ground here, AJ. It snowed.
That's crazy.
I know. I'm getting excited though. We like to ski and snowboard in our family, so we're excited for it. So with the sesame greens dressing, it does call for 2 tablespoons of tahini, but I'm doubling it. And but you don't need to do that much. You know, you just kind of do it to taste. If you want to use a little bit, just to make a little bit creamy, you could. But you don't have to use all of that. Oh, looking good. So excited. Okay, and then we're going to do some lemon juice. So 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you see, I'm not fancy enough to actually use real lemons.
I know.
This is how I stay sane, honestly. It's just quick stuff.
Same here. I use the bottled organic lemon juice from, I think it's called Santa Cruz.
Okay, and then a little bit of soy sauce. So this is going to be 2 teaspoons. I gotta say, it's much more fun to cook Thanksgiving dinner when I have somebody to talk to.
Well, I'll tell you what, you call me anytime. Anytime.
I might take you up on that.
Seriously, I'd love it.
Okay, and then I've got my minced garlic here. So this is going to be another 2 teaspoons of that. And this really, in fact, I think my husband usually goes a little bit overboard on the garlic because he loves it so much. I'm going to put a little bit extra. It's so good. I don't know if he's going to ever go overboard on that. All right. So I wish I had a whisk. I was trying to find, I swear I have one, but I couldn't find it earlier. But basically, you're just going to mix this all up. So you have it nice and blended. And it doesn't seem like you make a lot, but it covers the kale really nicely. You know, you don't really need a ton because it's very flavorful with the lemon and the garlic. Okay, I think our tofu loaf is almost done here. I can see that our kale is wilting, and I can feel that this gravy is starting to thicken up really nicely. Yeah, I don't know. Can you see that, AJ? Look how beautiful and green that's getting.
They're so verdant.
Yes. Okay, well that's definitely done. You don't need to cook that too much. So what I will do is grab one of these. And I should have a little bit of pot liquor in the bottom of here. But I always try to at least make one nice green thing for Thanksgiving, because I don't know if you noticed, but it seems like Thanksgiving things are always brown. Lots of brown stuff. You got to get some color.
I know, that's true. For what regular people eat.
Right, exactly. You know, you got your potatoes and your gravy and your stuffing and your, you know, whatever, your tofurkey or whatever you like to use. Okay. Okay, so here's our steamed kale. And I'm just gonna mix this up a little bit more. Okay, so you're basically just mixing it into those steamed greens. And this is a really easy way, at least in my house, to get my son to eat greens. He loves this and he'll just eat this all day long. I have to say though, for him, I've never had any issues with him eating his greens. Like, he will just eat salad, no problem. But I think it's because he always has. So you gotta, you know, if you've got little kids that you're wanting to make sure they're eating really healthy and eating plant-based, start them young. All right, so that's what that looks like. Super delicious. So that'll be something that we will definitely have this Thanksgiving as well. Okay, and then I want to show you what the tofu loaf ended up looking like. So,
Have you ever froze it?
the tofu loaf?
Mm-hmm.
No, you know, I wonder, because I know that when you freeze tofu, it changes the texture of it a little bit. So I don't know how it would be. I don't know if it would turn out good or not if you froze it.
You could take one piece and try and get back to us.
Oh, that's true. So you mean after doing this?
Yeah, after cooking it. Maybe after cooking it.
So there's the tofu loaf. So now it's nice and crispy on the top. And we've got our gravy that is starting to thicken up even more. So the gravy is really, really good on top of that tofu loaf.
I bet. Hey, we did get a medical question. Would you like to field it? It's about a calcium score, the test. How do you feel about that test? Rebecca wants to know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that test, a coronary artery calcium score, or a CAC score, is a quick CT scan of your heart. And what it is meant to do is look at the calcified plaque that's in your arteries that go to your heart. Now, that calcified plaque, that hard plaque, is not something that improves over time. So even if you go plant-based, it's not going to improve. Now, hopefully it doesn't get worse. But getting a CAC score can give you a glimpse into the likelihood that you have the ability to basically get plaque build up in your arteries. So for instance, some people will come to me and they will have elevated cholesterol and a strong family history of high cholesterol or even heart attacks or strokes, and they'll get a CAC score and it's 0. So for their entire life, they have not had any calcified plaque get into their arteries. Now, other people have been plant-based for a long time and they get a CAC score and it's really high, and they get really worried about that because they have a lot of plaque in their arteries. Well, you got to remember that this calcium has been building up over your entire life. So because it can't really go away, it's just a glimpse into what is your likelihood of putting plaque in your arteries. So I have a conversation with each of my patients about whether or not it makes sense to take a look at that or not. For some people, it's very motivating. If you have a higher likelihood of having plaque in your arteries, then maybe that's more motivating for you to stick to this way of eating. But it's really on a case-by-case basis whether or not I think it's worth it or not to have that checked. So Definitely, if you're going to get it done, you definitely want to talk to a doctor about the results though, so that you have a good idea of what you're getting into.
Thank you.
Yeah. And at plant-based telehealth, it is something that we can order. It's just an imaging test. We can give you an order to print off and take to an imaging center. Most insurance companies will not cover the cost of it. So you just have to ask what your out-of-pocket cost would be if it's something that you wanted to do. Okay, AJ, well, I'm gonna start making my last recipe, and that is going to be apple crisp. So this is what we make for our dessert.
Yum.
And this is another McDougall recipe, of course.
Question from Susanna. Does jarred garlic lose any health-giving properties compared to fresh garlic?
Charred, like cooked garlic? Is that what you said?
Like, you know how you get buy in a little jar. I think it's still raw, but
In a jar. I don't know. I wouldn't think so. It's really just, minced garlic that's kept in a jar. Fresh garlic is always delicious though.
But it's less convenient sometimes for people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point to make, AJ, because for some people eating this way can be really overwhelming, and it can feel like I could never do this. It's expensive or it's difficult, all these different recipes. So you've really got to make it work for you. You've got to make it sustainable, because it's so much more important to just do it the best you can if you're able to stick with it most of the time. So don't feel like you have to be perfect, and don't feel like you have to, make all these bootables and, special dressings and things like that. It can be really simple.
You're peeling the apples old school. You know what I do? I have a little tool that you just kind of put it on like that.
Well, part of this, so I was going to peel these ahead of time. But something that I really like about cooking, although I like to keep it really simple, is it feels kind of meditative to me. It really forces you to be in the moment. Of course, not when you're on a show and talking to a bunch of people, but normally when I'm at home, just by myself cooking, it's something that just allows you to just be doing one thing, not thinking about anything else. And peeling an apple is it's kind of therapeutic. So, but yes, so for the apple crisp, that is the McDougall recipe, it calls for 4 large firm apples peeled and sliced.
Firm apples as opposed to mushy apples.
Yeah.
It's funny because you've heard the saying, probably don't major in minor things. And so many people worry about just the minutia. And I think about, you don't go to a funeral because somebody used jarred garlic over fresh,
Right.
Some people, and Susanna's a friend. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything bad about what she said, but just so many of the people worry about these little things. And it's like, in the scheme of things, that's not why people are overweight. That's not why people are sick, because of these little things that people worry about so much, the minutia.
Absolutely. And I see that too in my own practice. People will say to me, I've done everything, and my cholesterol is still a little bit high. And I said, if you're doing the big stuff, which is removing the animal products, right? Because that's where you get the cholesterol. Animal foods have cholesterol, plant foods don't. So if you're removing all the animal foods, you're doing the biggest part of it. And then you got to get rid of the oil, because when you have a lot of oil in your diet, that can also increase your cholesterol. You have a high fat diet, it can increase your cholesterol. So if you're getting rid of your animal foods and the oils, you're doing 95% of it, 99% of it. And so all the little extra little things that can maybe help cholesterol, like amla powder and berberine and things like that, they might make a slight difference. But at the end of the day, it's, it all comes back to, what are you eating? What's your diet like? Are you moving? Are you managing stress? Are you getting good sleep? Staying away from tobacco, hopefully alcohol too. Some of the basic things. I'm not a fan of a lot of supplements. I tell people, make sure you're getting your B12, and some people need some extra things like vitamin D. But ultimately, you know, you just keep it really basic. It just comes down to how are you living your life? And you don't have to worry about the little things. And honestly, that's what's helped me kind of maintain just eating this way. It's just keeping things really simple, just eating simple foods, potatoes and sweet potatoes and rice and beans and corn, and veggies and fruits, you know, just keeping it really simple. And I think that is what I found to be the easiest way to maintain this is having that kind of a mindset. All right, so I'm just slicing up these apples now. This apple crisp one is actually a really simple one to make as well. So I have made this with apples from, we have a little apple tree that we share with our neighbor. And I thought, well, maybe I could make the apple crisp using those apples. And it turned out really good.
Oh, by the way, that little tool I have, it's not very expensive at Bed Bath & Beyond. It not only peels, but it slices it at the same time, and it takes like seconds. I'm going to get you one.
Okay.
Might even send you mine.
I would love that. Yeah, when I'm in a rush and I don't feel like doing all of this, that would be nice. I really don't mind doing some of these extra things sometimes. Okay, so I probably won't add all the apples in there. Maybe I'll do one more, and then I'll show you how to make the topping. One of the things I do differently with the apple crisp from what McDougall has in his recipe. Let me see. It says, it doesn't say whose recipe this is, so I'm not sure if it's a Mary McDougall or not. But I will actually double the amount of the topping because I think it needs more. But it's a really interesting mixture. So it calls for not only oats, but grape nut cereal. So that's something that I have to go to like a regular grocery store, like near us, we have a Smith's, and find grape nut cereal for this one.
I'm going to have grape nuts in probably 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they have like other versions of grape nuts, like in the health food aisle.
Yeah, you know, you would think that, and I've looked. I can't find anything that is that, because it's technically it's wheat. Let me grab the box. Yeah, it's whole grain wheat flour, malted barley flour, salt, and dried yeast. So it's really very simple ingredients, but I haven't found anything that's quite the same as this. So I'm not sure. Maybe someone watching has found something similar to a grape nuts, but I haven't been able to find anything as similar. Okay, so I've put our sliced apples down at the bottom of the dish there. So now what we will do is, the first thing they want you to do is toss the apples with lemon juice and cinnamon. So we're gonna do that. So let's see here. And
what is manuka? Melody, what do you mean? What is manuka? M-A-N-O-U-C-H-A, manucha. I don't know, manuka. I mean, there's a honey called manuka, but I don't know what manucha is. Can we say manucha? Oh, minutia. Okay. Okay. Minutia is just like a very, what would you say? Very minor, insignificant details?
Yeah. Getting into the minutia.
Oh yeah, Mona's saying Ezekiel makes a 4:9 grain cereal that is kind of crunchy like grape nuts.
Oh, right. And we buy that. My son likes the blue box version, so we literally just call it blue box. But that's the one that he really likes. I think it has almonds in it. But yeah, that would be an option to do the Ezekiel cereal. it's somewhat similar. So our gravy is thickening up very nicely. In fact, I think it's done. So I will just bring it over so you can kind of see what it looks like. So there it is. So that is super yummy for potatoes, mashed potatoes especially, but the tofu loaf. And then I also make a stuffing. My stuffing that I make is based on one that my mom and my grandma used to make. But instead of using, chicken broth or oil, I just use veggie broth and it tastes exactly the same. It's very delicious. Okay, so with the apple crisp, we're gonna put in a little bit of the lemon juice. So it looks like 1 tablespoon. Okay, and then for the cinnamon, it's a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. So AJ, what are you planning on having for Thanksgiving this year?
I'm planning on having restaurant food.
Oh.
So I'm new up here, so it was just me and Charles, and I didn't want to cook for 2 people. And it turned out that there's this wonderful vegan restaurant in Sacramento. It's fairly new. It's called Himalaya Organic, and it used to be a Tibetan monk. And it's one of those cool restaurants where like there's really no menu. They just make you a plate of delicious food every day with like a grain, a bean, a green, a steamed vegetable, a salad, and a soup. And you can either get a large plate or a medium plate. And it's really affordable. It's like $15. He doesn't use any sugar. And I don't think he uses oil. He might use salt, but if you call him at least 12 hours in advance, he'll do completely SOS free. And so that's where we're going. And since we didn't want to be alone, we put it on our meetup, and everybody's invited up till 46 seats are gone. That's how much.
Wow.
So that's
maybe that sounds like fun.
A lot less cleanup doing it that way,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish I lived nearby. I would love to come stop by and be part of that.
Almost everybody that's on the show, I say, God, I wish you lived nearby.
I know. We just need to have like a big plant-based community where we just have like our own big town. That'd be nice.
Debbie's suggesting Uncle Sam's cereal in place of grape nuts. She likes it better. That's sort of like a similar crunch.
What is it called?
Uncle Sam's.
Uncle Sam's. I don't know that one. Okay, so I tossed the apples with some lemon juice and cinnamon. So now we make the topping, which is grape nuts, oats, and cinnamon. So let me grab that. So I already have these measured out. Like I said, I do a double of the topping because I think the topping is so delicious and I think it needs more than what it calls for.
It's the best part.
Right? Okay, so here's our grape nuts, if you remember what those look like. And then we'll do our oats. And then a little bit of cinnamon. I love these spice jars that are wide open on the top, so you can actually put your measuring spoons in them.
You try to pour it, you pour it all out sometimes.
Okay, so we got our cinnamon. Then we're going to mix that up just a little bit, the dry ingredients. And this one calls for maple syrup. Again, I have maple syrup in my house. We use it very, very rarely, but on Thanksgiving, we like to make this with some maple syrup. So add that on there. And this is what kind of thickens it up, makes it kind of chewy. I'll show you what that's looking like. So as you kind of mix it up, it just becomes this really yummy, chewy texture. Okay. And then once you've mixed, it's just the grape nuts, the cinnamon, the oats, and the maple syrup. Once you have that nice and mixed, then you put that straight over the top of the apples. See, it makes a ton because I doubled it. But see, that's about half there, which should be fine for most people, but not for me. Not for me. I like extra. So we're gonna just cover it completely with this delicious topping.
Topping.
Okay. And I love it just because, you know, and I love apple crisp. It's just, I don't know why, something crunchy with apples. And just, oh, yum. Okay, and then the last thing you need to do is put together, so it calls for apple juice and cornstarch that you whisk together and then pour in here, and it helps it cook. So because I'm a potato lover, I use potato starch instead of cornstarch. Don't ask me why, but I just do.
Well, then you already have it in your house.
I already have it in my house. Yeah, I don't have cornstarch. I don't know why. I have potato starch. I'm sure I got it for something else at some point, and now I always keep it with me. Okay, so we will do, let's see. So it's 2/3 cup of apple juice.
Tony says, do you ever use dates?
I do, yeah. Yep, I've got dates in my fridge. I don't use them a ton, but sometimes I have recipes, especially Kathy Fisher has a nice book where she uses dates to help sweeten some of her recipes. Every so often, my son will eat them just for a snack. Okay, and then with the 2/3 cup apple juice, I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of the potato starch.
Sonia says they call it apple crumble in New Zealand. I always thought names: crisp, crumble, brown Betty, buckle, cobbler, foodie. I don't even know what is what. Oh, Ellen says, are you licensed in Texas? Because she needs a Zen Calm doctor like you.
Oh, so I actually just applied for my Texas license. So I'm hoping to have it any day now. I've already got my malpractice insurance covering Texas. So I'm just waiting patiently, not patiently, for my license to come through. So it should be any day now. And I will post it as soon as I get that license. But yes, it's coming very soon. Okay, so I mixed up the apple juice and the potato starch. And so basically all you do is you just pour it right over the top. And like I said, this just helps it cook down at the bottom. And I don't know if your followers might recognize these, but you're familiar with Mama Says meals.
Sure.
So whenever I get my Mama Says, they always have these fun little, I guess, what are these called? Laundry?
Yeah, clips.
Whatever. Yeah, laundry clips. But I keep them and they're so great for everything. But you'll know if you get Mama Says, you always get those. Okay, so that's it for the apple crisp. You end up baking it at 350 for 40 to 50 minutes. And you just want to watch, and you want to make sure that the apples, you're going to test them, make sure they're nice and soft, and that the top's nice and crispy. And that's it. So I'll show you what that looks like. Super yummy.
Right.
Juice is coming out a little bit, but a lot of people like to do the apple crisp with like vanilla ice cream or something. So if you have a vegan ice cream you like, we usually don't. We just do the apple crisp itself. But yeah, so with the tofu loaf, the gravy, we do mashed potatoes, we do stuffing, we do the greens, some kind of a green like the sesame greens, and then the apple crisp for dessert. It's actually quite simple. I mean, I made 4 of those recipes pretty easily within an hour. And it's really just making the mashed potatoes. And the way that I do the mashed potatoes is I just take about 3 pounds of potatoes, put those in the Instant Pot, put a little water in the bottom with the trivet, and let that go, I think, for about 10 minutes. And it gets the potatoes nice and soft. And then I transfer those into my blender and just whip them up with either some of the water that's left over from the Instant Pot or a little bit of plant milk. And you whip those up and they're nice and fluffy and delicious. So that's a really simple recipe. And the stuffing is really simple too. I either use just breadcrumbs and use what's called poultry seasoning. It's not a seasoning that has poultry in it. It's just poultry seasoning, or a stuffing mix that already has some seasoning in it. And I use celery and onion that I will saute in either veggie broth or water, add that to the stuffing with some veggie broth until it's a little bit moist, and then just bake that in the oven for about an hour. And it's delicious. So that's what we usually have for our Thanksgiving.
Wow. Yeah. And Melody saying, can she use arrowroot instead of potato starch? Sure.
Yes. Yeah. Any starch works. I mean, really all it is it's pulling out the carbohydrate, right? So potato starch is taking out the starchy part, the carbohydrate from the potato, or cornstarch, it's just taking out that carbohydrate from the corn. So any kind of starch that you want to use as a thickener would work.
Here's a question I'm sure you've heard before. Bella says, should we be concerned about the formation of acrylamides in baked starchy foods, such as the cereal, oats, potatoes?
I have not heard that one, but no, I've never heard that is an issue. Starches are fantastic for health, as long as you're focusing on the right kind of starches. When you think of starch, some people think of white bread and pasta and things like that, but really, at the end of the day, the best starches are the starchy vegetables: potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans, grains, legumes. So you want to focus on the whole food as much as you can.
Absolutely. Well, that looks like a delicious spread, let me tell you.
Yeah, I'm excited to eat this later.
Oh yeah, I don't know how you're going to not eat it right now. It looks so good.
I know. I'm gonna I got to still bake my apple crisp. But yeah.
Yeah. Heather says she likes to add a few cranberries in with the apple for her apple crisp for the holidays. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, and in fact, the recipe on McDougall calls for currants or raisins. I'm not a huge fan of raisins in anything, so I don't add that. But if you like those kinds of things, you could definitely add that, a little bit of dried fruit.
Wow. Brenda saying those little thick clips, they're called clothespins.
Yes, clothes. I was like, laundry.
Yeah, I know, because we don't see them really
Clothespins.
Yeah. Okay, so Susanna says, what do you do for movement every day? I'm assuming you do something.
So my preferred movement every day is walking. I am lucky enough to live in the hills, and so I get to walk straight up these hills and all over the place. And so that's what I do most days. I also do like to do a little bit of yoga. And then in the winter time, we do a lot of skiing and snowboarding. So my husband and I both snowboard, and my son skis. And so most Saturdays and Sundays in the wintertime, we're up on the mountain doing that. And then I love the outdoors. So in the summertime, we do a lot of hiking and camping.
One of the viewers are saying they don't peel the apples. Do you think it's necessary to peel them?
So I think so, because the skin is to me, the texture of the skin in the apple crisp just isn't as good. So I think you could definitely do it with the skins if you like that. But for me, I just don't like the texture of it in there.
Oh, you're very picky with your no raisin policy.
I know, but I've always been that way. I don't understand why raisins get added to, when I was younger, like cinnamon rolls and cookies. Like, why would you put raisins in something that tastes delicious?
I had an uncle that was like that. He would not eat, it could be the most delicious thing, but he wouldn't eat it with raisins. I find that I don't really care for the traditional dark raisins, but I do like the golden ones. They taste different and better.
I agree. And I like those in a salad. I like them by themselves, but for some reason, when you add raisins into some sort of a baked dish, it's just not good to me.
It's not your jam. So I know if you come with no raisins and no skin on the apple. Jessie says, I love Dr. Davis. She has such a great personality. So Alana agrees with me. She doesn't like dark raisins either. So Sherry's saying, but Dr. McDougall's recipe for cranberry sauce calls for brown sugar. Help. Then use mine. I have 2 or 3 of them with just using dates. And I'm doing a cooking demo for Thanksgiving for Forks Over Knives, which is absolutely free, next Wednesday at 1:30. And I'll be showing you how to make cranberry sauce with 3 ingredients: dates, cranberries, and oranges. That's it.
Oh, AJ, I'm going to make that for our Thanksgiving this year. That sounds amazing.
So easy because you don't have to cook it, and you just, it takes, I call it 5-minute cranberry relish, but really you could do it in 2 if you have a Breville.
That sounds like a recipe that I could make.
I think you could. Well, this was a lot of fun. I love watching other people cook, and you're like you're very zen. But feel free to call me anytime you're cooking and you just want to chat, and I'll chat with you. Make it.
I like it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Davis. You're wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Chef AJ. Thank you for everything that you do and for having this outlet to be able to share all this great information. Your show is just amazing, and I am just lucky to be a small part of it.
Well, we love having you, and we love having you, the live audience, and the people that watch it afterwards. Thanks so much for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. I do hope you'll come back tomorrow when my guest is Nina Chantal. I would hold up her book, but I put it over there, but she has one, and she's going to be making many recipes, including a pumpkin popsicle that's triple dipped in chocolate. That sounds good, doesn't it, Dr. Davis? Triple dipped.
That does sound pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, take care and say hi to your family.
Will do.